The security station buzzed with activity as Ambassador stepped through the massive doors. Her crystalline skin caught the light and threw it back in brilliant blue patterns across the walls. She stood 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that moved like liquid grace and mandibles that clicked when she was thinking. Today, those mandibles clicked with irritation. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones that made her species famous across the galaxy. "I hope you have good news for me." Commander was a thick-set human with graying hair and tired eyes. He had been running security assignments for the Galactic Council for 15 years. In that time, he had seen diplomats from every corner of known space. None of them had been as demanding as. "Ambassador, I have your protection detail ready," said. He gestured toward the corner of the room where a figure stood quietly in the shadows. Turned to look and her mandibles stopped clicking. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she began to laugh. The sound filled the room like wind chimes in a storm. The figure stepped forward into the light, was everything that was not. Where she was tall, he was short. Where she was impressive, he was ordinary. He stood 5 feet 6 inches tall with dark hair and calm brown eyes. His black uniform was simple and clean. No decorations, no weapons that anyone could see. "This is a joke," said, still laughing. "Please tell me this is a joke." Said nothing. He stood with his hands at his sides, watching everything in the room. His eyes moved constantly, taking in the exits, the other people, the potential hiding spots, but his face showed nothing. "This is," Commander said. "He is from Earth's Special Protection Unit. He has been assigned to keep you safe during the trade negotiations." "Safe?" His voice went higher. "Commander, I am going to the most dangerous meeting in the galaxy. The Syndicate has tried to kill me 3 times already. They have hired the best assassins that money can buy, and you give me this." She waved one of her upper arms toward. "Look at him. He is barely bigger than a child. On my world, we would use him as a messenger boy." Commander had heard this before. Every alien diplomat said the same thing when they saw their human protection detail for the first time. "Ambassador has successfully completed 47 protection missions. He has never lost a client." "Because he has never faced real danger," said. "Look at him. He has no armor, no visible weapons, no size, no strength. How is he supposed to protect me from trained killers?" Finally spoke. His voice was quiet and steady. "Ma'am, if you are ready, we should leave for your transport." Stared at him. In her culture, only the strong had the right to speak to leaders. This small human had just interrupted her conversation with a superior officer. It was either very brave or very stupid. "You see," she said too, "he does not even understand proper respect." But something in his calm manner made her pause. She had expected him to be nervous, or to argue, or to try to prove himself. Instead, he simply waited. His dark eyes met hers without fear or anger. "Fine," she said, "but I want it on record that I requested a proper bodyguard. When this little human gets us both killed, I want everyone to know that I warned them." They walked through the station corridors toward the docking bay. The assistant Pip, along beside them. Pip was a small and nervous with large eyes and fur that changed color with his emotions. Right now, his fur was the pale yellow of worry. "Ambassador," Pip whispered, "perhaps we should trust the commander's judgment." "Trust?" laughed again. "Pip, look at our protector. I could break him in half with one hand." She was probably right. Had been born on a heavy-gravity world where the weak died young. Her people were natural warriors, strong and fast and dangerous. This human looked like he would blow away in a strong wind. But had heard every word and he did not react. He simply walked beside them, his steps quiet on the metal floor. His eyes never stopped moving. He noticed the maintenance worker who watched them too carefully. He counted the security cameras. He memorized the location of every door and corridor. When they reached the docking bay, a transport ship waited for them. The Serenity's Edge was a beautiful vessel built for comfort and speed. It would carry them to the neutral station where the trade negotiations would take place. Other diplomatic parties were boarding their ships as well. Saw ambassador from the warrior worlds, surrounded by 6 massive bodyguards in powered armor. She saw the delegation with their energy shield generators and plasma rifles. Everyone had proper protection. Everyone except her. "You're too small to be my guard," she said to as they walked up the boarding ramp. She laughed, but this time there was less humor in it and more frustration. "This is madness." Stopped walking and turned to face her. For the first time since they had met, he really looked at her. His brown eyes were serious and thoughtful. "Ambassador," he said, "I understand your concerns, but I am here to do a job. I will keep you alive no matter what it takes." There was something in his voice that made pause. It was not boasting or empty promise. It was simple fact, stated as calmly as if he had told her the time of day. "We shall see," she said. They entered the ship together. In 3 days they would reach their destination. In 3 days would learn what she had gotten for a guardian. But for now, she was convinced that she was traveling to her death with the smallest, weakest protector in the galaxy. Said nothing more, he had work to do. The first day aboard the Serenity's Edge, told everything he needed to know about his client. Ambassador treated him like a servant who had disappointed her before he had even started working. "Human," she called from her luxury cabin, "bring me my morning meal, and be careful with the crystal fruit. It is worth more than you make in a year." Walked to the ship's galley and collected her breakfast tray. The crystal fruit was indeed valuable. It grew only on her home world and had to be kept at exactly the right temperature. He checked the thermal unit twice before carrying the tray to her cabin. "Put it on the table," said without looking up from her data pad, "and move my luggage to the storage area. I need more space." The luggage was heavy, designed for someone with 4 arms and tremendous strength. Lifted each piece carefully and carried them one by one to storage. Never said thank you. She acted as if he was furniture that could walk. Other passengers on the ship watched this with amusement. The Serenity's Edge carried 5 diplomatic parties, each with their own bodyguards. Those bodyguards were impressive beings. People wore powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. The delegation had brought energy weapons that hummed with deadly power. Even the trade group had hired mercenaries who stood 7 feet tall and had arms like tree trunks. Then there was, small, quiet, apparently unarmed, and treated like a servant by his own client. "Poor little human," one of them said to his partner. "He picked the wrong job." But was not worried about what others thought. He was learning. While he carried luggage and served meals, his mind was working. He memorized every corridor on the ship. He counted steps between important locations. He studied the other passengers and their bodyguards, looking for anything unusual. On the second day, he found what he was looking for. 3 passengers were not what they seemed. They claimed to be merchants from different worlds, but they moved like soldiers. They were too alert, too careful, too coordinated. When they thought no one was watching, their eyes always went to. Was watching. That evening, he approached Pip while the little was working on his data pad in the ship's common area. Pip's fur was its normal brown color, which meant he was calm and focused. "Pip," said quietly, sitting down across from him, "I need to tell you something." Pip looked up with his large, dark eyes. "What is it, Guardian?" "There are 3 agents on this ship," said. "They are not merchants. They are here to kill the ambassador." Pip's fur immediately changed to pale yellow. His hands shook as he set down his data pad. "Are you certain?" "Yes," said. "Have you heard anything from intelligence sources?" Pip looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "Yesterday I received a coded message. It said the Syndicate had operatives aboard a diplomatic vessel. I thought it might be referring to another ship." "It was not," said. "They are here and they will make their move soon." "Shouldn't we tell the ship's security?" Pip asked. "Not yet," said. We need to be sure, and we need to be ready." Pip's fur shifted to a worried orange. "What should we do?" "Keep the ambassador in secure areas as much as possible, and trust me to handle the rest." That night did not sleep. Instead, he walked the corridors of the ship, moving like a ghost through the dim emergency lighting. He studied every room, every access panel, every potential weapon. In the galley, he noted the kitchen knives and the heavy pans. In the maintenance areas, he found tools that could be used for more than ship repair. Most importantly, he studied the spaces where a fight might happen. The ship's main corridor was long and narrow, with handholds along the walls for zero-gravity maneuvering. The ceiling was low, only 7 feet high. It would be a difficult place for large beings to fight effectively. It would be perfect for someone small and fast. On the third day, treatment got worse. Other passengers had been whispering that she had the weakest bodyguard on the ship. This embarrassed her, and she took it out on him. "Human," she snapped during the midday meal, "stand in the corner. I do not want anyone to see you while I am eating with important people." Stood in the corner as requested. From there, he could see the entire dining area. He watched the 3 agents, who sat at separate tables and pretended not to know each other. He noticed how they positioned themselves near the exits. He saw how they avoided eating or drinking anything that would slow their reflexes. They were definitely planning something. After the meal, one of the other ambassadors approached with a smug expression. Ambassador was from a warrior species, and his bodyguard was a mountain of muscle and armor. Said, "I could not help but notice your protection detail. Are you certain that is wise? These negotiations are very dangerous." "I know," said through gritted teeth. "I was assigned this human by the council. I had no choice." "Perhaps you could share my protection," offered. "My bodyguard is strong enough to protect us both." His crystalline skin flashed with anger. "That is very kind, but I will manage with what I have." As they walked away, she turned to with fury in her eyes. "Do you see what you have done?" she hissed. "You have made me look weak in front of my peers. You have embarrassed me." Said nothing. He simply followed her back to her cabin. That evening, Pip came to with new information. "I accessed the ship's passenger records," he whispered. "Those 3 merchants you identified, their documentation is perfect, too perfect, and they all booked passage at the last minute." "How long until we reach our destination?" asked. 12 hours, Pip said. Nodded. "They will move tonight or tomorrow morning, probably when the diplomatic party is gathered for the pre-arrival briefing." "What should we do?" "Be ready," said, "and stay close to the ambassador." As the ship moved through space toward their destination, made his final preparations. He had studied the enemy. He knew the battlefield. He had planned for every possibility. Tomorrow would learn what humans were capable of. Tomorrow she would stop laughing. The alarm that woke everyone on the Serenity's edge was not the gentle tone that meant they were approaching their destination. It was the harsh, urgent wail that meant danger. Was already awake when it started. He had been sitting quietly in the corridor outside's cabin, watching and waiting. The ship's sudden drop out of hyperspace had been violent enough to shake the walls. That was not normal. "What is happening?" demanded as she emerged from her cabin. Her crystalline skin was flashing between blue and purple, which meant she was confused and starting to become afraid. Unknown said, "Stay close to me." The ship's communication system crackled to life. "All passengers report to the main corridor for emergency briefing," Captain's voice announced. "All diplomatic parties and security details, please gather immediately." Pip appeared from his small cabin, his fur bright yellow with worry. "Guardian, this does not seem right. Why would they call everyone together during an emergency?" Was thinking the same thing. In a real emergency, passengers should go to escape pods or safe rooms, not gather in one place. But orders were orders, and refusing might cause more problems than following them. "We go," said, "but stay alert." The main corridor of the Serenity's edge was the largest open space on the ship. It stretched nearly 100 feet from bow to stern, with the ceiling 7 feet high and handholds along both walls for zero-gravity movement. Normally, it was a place for passengers to exercise or socialize during long journeys. Today it felt like a trap. All 5 diplomatic parties gathered in the corridor with their bodyguards. Ambassador stood with his 6 armored warriors. The delegation clustered around their energy weapons. They had activated their personal shield generators. Even the peaceful trade representatives had positioned their hired mercenaries between themselves and the exits. Looked around at all this military preparation, and then at who stood beside her wearing only his simple black uniform. "I should have requested better protection," she muttered. Captain entered the corridor with 2 of his security officers. He was a professional spacer with 20 years of experience, but his face was pale and his hands shook slightly. "Ladies and," he began, "we have experienced a mechanical failure in our hyperspace drive. We are currently stranded between star systems while my engineers work to repair the problem." Ambassador stepped forward, his massive bodyguard moving with him. "Captain, how long will these repairs take?" "Unknown at this time," replied. "I wanted to brief everyone personally so that you would not be concerned by any unusual noises or ship movements during the repair process." It sounded reasonable, but was studying the captain's body language, and something was wrong. Eyes kept moving to specific points in the corridor. He was looking at the 3 agents, though he was trying not to be obvious about it. The 3 agents had positioned themselves perfectly, one near each exit and one in the middle of the group. If had planned an ambush, this was exactly how he would have done it. Captain said quietly, "I think you should." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. In that moment of darkness, heard the soft whisper of weapons being drawn and the rustle of movement that was too coordinated to be natural. When the red lights came on, 12 figures stood in the corridor who had not been there before. They were tall and broad, with the dark exoskeletons and 4 arms that marked them as. Each one held military-grade plasma weapons that could cut through ship hull. The 3 merchants had shed their disguises and now stood with their true comrades. Captain and his security officers had weapons pointed at their own heads by soldiers. "Nobody move," the lead said in accented Galactic Standard. His voice was deep and cold. "This vessel is now under our control." The other bodyguards in the corridor began reaching for their weapons, but stopped when plasma rifles swung toward them. 12 with military training and superior firepower had every advantage. "We want only 1 passenger," the leader continued. "Ambassador of the give her to us and the rest of you will live." His crystalline skin went from blue to deep purple, the color of terror among her people. Her 4 arms shook as she looked around the corridor for help. His bodyguards were brave warriors, but they were smart enough to recognize a hopeless situation. Their powered armor was strong, but not strong enough to stop 12 plasma rifles. The mercenaries were paid to fight, but not to die uselessly. Even the energy weapons would take too long to charge for an effective first shot. Everyone was looking for someone else to make the first move. Everyone was hoping someone else would take the terrible risk. The leader said, raising his plasma rifle toward her, "Step forward and this will be quick." That was when moved. He did not reach for a weapon that no one had seen him carrying. He did not shout orders or make threats. He simply took 1 step forward, placing himself between and the lead. "No," he said quietly. The leader looked down at him with amusement. Like everyone else, he saw only a small human in a simple uniform. No armor, no visible weapons, no apparent threat. "Little human," they said, "move aside or you will die with her." Did not move aside. He stood perfectly still, his dark eyes focused on the alien's face. His breathing was calm and steady. His hands hung loose at his sides. But something had changed in his posture, something subtle that only a trained fighter would recognize. His weight had shifted to the balls of his feet. His shoulders had relaxed in a way that meant they were ready for explosive movement. His eyes had gone from watchful to predatory. "Last chance," the said. Smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Yours too," he said. For a moment, nobody moved. The corridor was silent except for the hum of plasma weapons and the soft sound of breathing. 12 armed faced one small human, and everyone knew how this had to end. Then exploded into motion, and everything changed. The leader never got the chance to pull his trigger. In the time it took him to think about firing, had already begun the most devastating 12 seconds of combat that anyone in that corridor would ever witness. The impossible had begun. Moved like lightning in a bottle. His first motion was so fast that the lead's brain could not process what was happening. One moment the small human was standing 5 feet away. The next moment was inside the alien's reach, his hand striking like a hammer against a nerve cluster just below the lower right arm. The plasma rifle clattered to the floor as this hand went numb, but was already moving, using the alien's own body as a shield and a weapon. The second tried to get a clear shot, but grabbed the first alien's upper arms and spun him around. The heavy crashed into his comrade like a living boulder, and both of them went down in a tangle of limbs and exoskeleton. 3 seconds had passed. The other were starting to react, but they were thinking like warriors from a heavy-gravity world. They expected strength versus strength, armor against armor. They were not ready for something small and fast that turned their own size against them. Rolled under the falling bodies and came up next to the third. This one was quick enough to swing his rifle toward the human, but was quicker. He grabbed one of the wall handholds and used it to change direction impossibly fast, swinging himself up and around like a gymnast. His foot connected with this weapon hand. The alien was strong enough to lift a small vehicle, but strength meant nothing when the blow hit exactly the right spot. Bones cracked, and another plasma rifle went flying. Landed in a crouch as the roared in pain. He immediately sprang forward again, staying low where the big aliens could not easily reach him. 6 seconds. The fourth and fifth were ready for him now. They moved to bracket him between them, their weapons tracking his movements. But they were thinking in straight lines and did not move in straight lines. He bounded off the corridor wall, using his legs to push himself toward the ceiling. They raised their weapons to follow him, but was already pushing off the ceiling to change direction again. He came down behind the fourth like a falling stone. His elbow struck the base of the alien's skull, right at the joint where the exoskeleton was weakest. The dropped like a cut tree. The fifth spun to face him, but was already moving again. He slid between the alien's legs and struck upward with both hands, hitting pressure points that no one else in the galaxy knew existed. The nervous system overloaded, and he collapsed. 9 seconds. The remaining 7 were starting to panic. This was not how fights were supposed to work. The small enemy was supposed to stand and fight, or run away, or die quickly. He was not supposed to move like water and strike like thunder. 3 of them fired their plasma rifles, but was no longer where they aimed. The energy beams crossed harmlessly through empty space while bounced off the wall again, using the corridor's narrow confines like a 3-dimensional puzzle that only he knew how to solve. He landed on the 6th back and wrapped his arm around the alien's throat, not to choke him, but to reach the nerve bundle at the base of his neck. One precise squeeze, and the went limp. Dropped to the floor and immediately rolled sideways as the 7th tried to crush him with a downward strike. The alien's fist hit the metal deck hard enough to dent it, but was already behind him, striking at the joints in his exoskeleton. 10 seconds. 2 rushed him from opposite directions, thinking that overwhelming force would end this impossible fight. waited until they were almost on him, then dropped flat to the deck. The aliens crashed into each other above him with the sound of breaking bone and cracking shell. As they fell, rose like a spring and struck both of them in rapid succession. His hands found the spots where their nervous systems were most vulnerable, and both went down. The last three had backed away, their weapons raised but their confidence shaken. They had just watched one small human destroy 9 of their heavily armed comrades in less than 10 seconds. It was impossible, but they had seen it happen. "Kill him," one of them shouted, "all of us together." They fired their plasma rifles at the same time, filling the air with deadly energy, but was not there when the beams arrived. He had already analyzed their positions, calculated their firing angles, and found the one spot in the corridor that all 3 beams could not reach at once. He came at them from the side, moving along the wall with his hands on the handholds. The lead tried to track him, but suddenly reversed direction, confusing the alien's aim. 11 seconds. Reached the first of the 3 and struck him in the center of his chest, right where the exoskeleton plates met. Thus breathing stopped as his diaphragm cramped, and he fell backward, gasping for air. The second swung his rifle like a club, but ducked under the swing and came up inside the alien's guard. His palm struck to this inner elbow, hyperextended the joint backwards. The alien screamed and dropped his weapon. The last was backing toward the exit, his rifle shaking in his hands. This was the one who had spoken, who had threatened, who had started this fight. Looked at him with cold, dark eyes. "Please," the whispered, "please, I surrender." Stopped moving. For a moment, the corridor was silent except for the groaning of injured aliens and the harsh breathing of the last conscious. "You should have thought of that before you threatened her," said quietly. 12 seconds. His final move was almost gentle compared to what had come before. He simply walked up to the last and pressed his finger against a spot just below the alien's ear. The eyes rolled back, and he collapsed unconsciously to the deck. The corridor fell silent. Stood among 12 unconscious or disabled, breathing just slightly harder than normal. His uniform was torn in a few places, but he was otherwise unharmed. He looked around at the other bodyguards, the ambassadors, the ship's crew, all of whom were staring at him with expressions of complete shock. "Someone should call ship security to collect these," he said calmly, "and we should check the captain and his officers for injuries." Nobody moved. They were all too stunned to process what they had just witnessed. Walked over to, who was pressed against the corridor wall with her crystalline skin flashing between purple and silver. Her forearms were shaking, and her mandibles clicked rapidly with shock. "Are you injured, Ambassador?" he asked. She stared at him with new eyes. This small, quiet human who had carried her luggage and served her meals had just done something that should have been impossible. He had faced overwhelming odds and won through pure skill and speed. "How?" she whispered. Straightened his torn uniform and looked around the corridor one more time, making sure there were no other threats. "Evolution," he said simply. The word hung in the air like a promise and a warning. For the first time since humans had joined the galactic community, someone had seen what they were really capable of. And the galaxy would never be the same. The silence in the corridor lasted for nearly a minute. Everyone stood frozen, trying to understand what they had just seen. 12 heavily armed assassins lay unconscious or groaning on the deck. The small human that everyone had dismissed stood calmly among them without a scratch. Captain was the first to move. He checked his security officers, who were shaken but unhurt, then activated his communication system. "Medical team to main corridor," he announced. "Security team to main corridor. We have multiple unconscious hostiles who need restraint and medical attention." The other bodyguards began to lower their weapons. Armored warriors looked at with something that might have been respect. The mercenaries were whispering to each other in their own language, but their tone was awed rather than mocking. Pip over too, his fur cycling through colors so fast it looked like a rainbow. Ambassador, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Did not answer. She was still staring at, her crystalline skin slowly shifting from purple back toward blue. Her mandibles had stopped their nervous clicking. Guardian, she said finally, I need to understand. How did you do that? Was checking the fallen to make sure they were secure but still breathing. He did not look up as he answered. Training Ambassador and evolution. That is not an answer, said. I have seen the finest warriors from a dozen worlds. I have never seen anything like what you just did. This time did look up. His dark eyes were serious but not unkind. Your people evolved on a heavy world with large predators. You became strong and tough to survive. They evolved thick shells and powerful weapons. Every species in the galaxy became bigger, stronger, more armored. He stood up and brushed dust off his uniform. Humans evolved on a world with many different dangers. We became fast, adaptable, and efficient. We learned to use our environment and our enemy's own strength against them. Ambassador stepped forward, his massive bodyguard beside him. Human, that was impressive, but 12 opponents. How is such a thing possible? Practice, said simply, and understanding that size is not always an advantage. Pip had been working on his data pad with trembling claws. Now he looked up with wide eyes. Guardian, I accessed your service record. It says you have completed 47 protection missions with a 100% success rate. 48 now, said. But look at these missions, Pip continued, his voice getting higher with excitement. Saved Ambassador Krill from 15 raider attack ships, protected Trade Minister Vox through the siege of Station, escorted the Terran Colonial Council through active combat zones on 4 different worlds. The other bodyguards were listening now. Some of them pulled out their own data pads to verify Pip's claims. It's true, one of them said. This human has been in situations that would terrify a trained army, and he has never lost a client. Never even had a client injured, head bodyguard added. How is that possible? Shrugged, I do my job. But was beginning to understand that there was more to it than that. She approached slowly, her 4 arms spread in the traditional gesture of profound respect. Guardian, she said, I owe you my life, and I owe you an apology. You do not need to apologize, replied. You judged based on what you could see. Most species do the same thing. That is no excuse, said firmly. I treated you badly because I thought you were weak. I was wrong. She turned to face the other passengers in the corridor. All of us were wrong. We looked at this human and saw only his size. We should have looked at his record. We should have trusted the judgment of those who assigned him to protect me. Captain approached with his security team. Guardian, my people will secure these attackers and hold them for trial. Do you need medical attention? I am fine, said, but you should check your ship for other infiltrators. These 12 were probably not working alone. The captain nodded and sent his team to sweep the ship, turn back to. Ambassador, we should continue to our destination. The trade negotiations are still important. Yes, agreed, but things will be different now. She was right. Word of the fight spread through the ship's communication systems and then to the broader galaxy within hours. By the time they reached the neutral station where the negotiations were to take place, everyone had heard the story. The small human bodyguard, who had defeated 12 armed assassins in 12 seconds. At the station, things were indeed different. When walked through the docking bay with beside her, other delegations stepped aside respectfully. The security guards nodded to as an equal. The station commander personally welcomed them and assured them that additional security measures were in place. During the negotiations, found that other ambassadors listened to her more carefully. They had heard about her bodyguard, and they wondered what other capabilities humans might have that they had overlooked. The negotiations were successful. Trade agreements were signed that would benefit several worlds. and through it all stood quietly in the corner, watching and protecting. When they returned to the ship for the journey home, insisted that take the cabin next to hers instead of the small quarters he had been given before. "Guardian," she said as they prepared to depart, "I have a request." "What do you need, Ambassador?" "When we return to the capital, I am going to file a formal request with your government. I want you as my permanent protection detail." Raised an eyebrow. "That may not be possible. I have other assignments." "Then I will wait," said. "I have learned something important on this journey. Humans should not be underestimated, and you should not be treated as anything less than the professional you are." As the ship jumped back into hyperspace, allowed himself a small smile. The mission was complete, the client was safe, and perhaps the galaxy had learned something valuable. Humans were small, yes, but they were also dangerous in ways that no one had expected. They were survivors who had turned adaptation into an art form. And they were no longer going to be overlooked. On dozens of worlds, other alien leaders began placing requests for human bodyguards. The word spread through diplomatic channels, military academies, and security services. The small species from the third planet of an unremarkable star system were not as weak as they appeared. Did not know it yet, but he had just changed how the entire galaxy viewed his species. He had shown them that evolution was not just about becoming bigger and stronger. Sometimes it was about becoming better. And humans were very, very good at being better.